Hey, you guys, thanks for being patient. We are live on Burgundy Blue Commentary where we talk about what we want to talk about when we're ready to talk about it. Today, we want to talk about Charlie Kirk. And I'm so thankful to my guest, Goddess Watts. Thanks for being here, Goddess.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for sure. I do not know much about Charlie Kirk, and I wanted to cover this because it's a lot of questions out there floating, a lot of conspiracies and everything like that. And we learned some history actually yesterday when we were discussing it a little bit about, what beliefs Charlie Kirk followed and how history sort of repeated itself. So I guess we'll start with who is Charlie Kirk, and
Okay.
I'll let you take the floor.
So Charlie Kirk is considered what many people call a right-wing political commentator. Some call him an activist, but he's basically kind of like a media personality. He founded this. He kind of founded this nonprofit organization called Turning Point USA, which basically is, its job is to spread conservative politics and, in different levels of education. When you're talking about high school, college, and higher education things. And Charlie Kirk's mission was basically kind of going to these college campuses and trying to spread the conservative politics to the young folks, because when we're thinking about conservative politics, not many young people are into it. Uh, so he feels like there is a need for a spread of the reason why we should follow conservative politics amongst the youth. Because Charlie Kirk he was relatively a young person. He was about 31 years old, so he can he can relate to the youth a little bit better than say somebody like me who's in his 50s. But Charlie Kirk actually is from this area. He was born and raised in Arlington Heights, so he was in a place where. If you think about Cook County and some of the areas where Republicans live at, Arlington Heights is one of those places. So you can kind of like understand what where he gets his politics from. But he was also what many people called a Christian evangelical. He often preached and promoted what many people call Christian nationalism. And what Christian nationalism is basically kind of blurring the lines between church and state. He wanted a government where it basically followed the tenets and the theology of the Bible to the T. Even if you're not Christian, you should follow the tenets of the Bible. So Christian nationalism is problematic in a sense because of the fact that, like I said, it blurs the line between state and religion. So Charlie Kirk grew up conservative. He's also a big supporter of Donald Trump. Many people feel like he helped Donald Trump win the election in 2024 amongst the young voters, because the thing is that Trump, in winning this vote, one of the key wins for him was getting and mobilizing young conservatives to the ballot box. So when you think about Charlie Kirk's presence in conservative politics, even though he's not a politician, he's not an elected official, he's not even an appointed official, he's just basically somebody with a microphone who basically kind of spews a lot of racist rhetoric, as I call it. When you think about some of the things that he said in the past about Black folks, even and especially Black women, He, he codes it in very, very, very refined racist language. Like he doesn't technically use the N word or anything. I don't even think he uses white nationalism, but you can tell by listening to him that he's very much anti-black, suspected racist, and also too he he kind of like spews a lot of the far right conservative talking points, you know things that that many people would feel would be racist language towards them when you're talking about black and brown people. So this is kind of like a snapshot of Charlie Kirk's life. 2 weeks ago, he was doing what he typically does, going to Utah Valley State, which is going to Utah. Obviously, I think less than 10% of the population is black in the state of Utah. And as he does at all of the campuses that he visits, he basically has this thing called Prove Me Wrong, where he kind of debates the audience about certain things, certain ideas that are unpopular. And I think if I'm not mistaken, they were talking about gun rights in his very last conversation he's had on this side of the earth. And I think his last words was gang violence. And then next thing you know, a shot rang out, hit his neck. And then, Charlie Kirk is bleeding. He's rushed to the hospital, but, he's pronounced dead on arrival. And so that's how, Charlie Kirk's life had ended. He had a wife and I think two kids. So yeah. So there's been a lot of mixed reaction towards his death. Many on the conservative side have made him a martyr, made him a hero. Some people are making him a saint. Then there's backlash on the liberals who would, some would celebrate his death, kind of like say, well, he deserved it because he was spewing racist rhetoric. And then, there's just some like me who were kind of saddened by the whole situation. I no way celebrate anybody's death, but I understand who he was and what he said and how he said it, because, Charlie Kirk is a white nationalist. Now, did he deserve it? Did he deserve the horrible, violent death because he's a white nationalist? No, not really. Because the views that Charlie Kirk spewed was typical America. I think the problem is that when certain people talk about Charlie Kirk, and when they talk about this country, they say, what Charlie Kirk said is not what America is. No, that is exactly what America is. Charlie Kirk is exactly what the typical white male American thinks. So that's just my aspect of his kind of like truth telling. Now, many of his analysis and especially political history of this country is wrong because of the fact that, he believes that, slavery was necessary for Black folks. And it was also something that he said that they abolished way before the Civil War, which I don't find any proof of that. If you look it up, there's a debate that he had with Breonna Joy Taylor, who is she's what they call a left-leaning commentator who has a podcast called Bad Faith. They did a debate about 3 years ago, and I thought it was an interesting debate because the topic was, does systematic racism exist? And obviously Charlie Kirk didn't believe systematic racism exists, and Breonna Joy Taylor believed that it did exist. And basically, it was like a 1 hour and 20-minute debate on it. And Breonna is a very intelligent. She's actually a former lawyer from Harvard. She graduated from Harvard, so she has a law degree from Harvard. So obviously, she's, she knows something. But the thing is that Charlie Kirk has been on these tours of debating, people about DEI and racism and many of the things that the Trump administration is trying to kind of like either get rid of or try to rewrite history, because Kirk, in this debate between Breonna Joy Taylor, stated that America was the first country that abolished slavery, and that was not the case at all. Matter of fact, Mexico abolished slavery 40 years before the United States did. And as I said on this show, the Haitian Revolution was an abolishment of slavery, and that happened 60 years before the abolishment of slavery in the United States. So he likes to basically kind of lie on history because of the fact that he feels like America is the greatest country ever on the face of the earth. He feels that America is the best thing since sliced bread to this world. He feels like America is a leap forward for humanity. And he would do anything to protect the legacy of America, even including kind of giving leeway to our forefathers for owning slaves, or this country's forefathers, not typically my forefathers, because if I was living during that time,
America's not systemically racist.
Yeah, I would have been enslaved during that time. So not my forefathers, but America's forefathers. So it was a pretty interesting debate. So I suggest people to kind of like look at that, because the one thing about Charlie Kirk in his debating, because he likes to debate people, but you see more videos of him kind of like debating unprepared people. That's why he goes to these college campuses, because many of the students who are still in school, who are still like studying rhetoric and debating skills, they really don't have the comeback to what Charlie Kirk brings. Because the one thing about Charlie Kirk he likes to do is he likes to throw stats out there without any type of reference point, any type of proof, stuff like that. But most people who aren't prepared to debate typically won't have a good comeback behind that. But when he debates somebody like Breonna Joy Taylor, who is prepared for his rhetoric, he kind of gets stuck and he keeps repeating himself. And basically, if you watch that debate, he's very kind of disrespectful to her in a sense as well. So that's kind of a snapshot of Charlie Kirk. A lot of the reaction, and I think I touched on this a few minutes ago, of his death, where some people were celebrating it, and some people were kind of like, making him a martyr, because the thing about it is that when you look at one side of it, Charlie Kirk is basically kind of he's basically a martyr to the right wing Republicans, and they're literally doing things in his memory that I don't even think Charlie Kirk would approve of. Like, for instance, this Jimmy Kimmel situation. And for those who don't know, Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air indefinitely by Disney, Walt Disney, who kind of like owns the studio that does his show, because of some comments he made about the Trump administration off the death of Charlie Kirk. And executives from that TV station or that media company decided that his his comments that he made last week about it was considered what they call quote unquote hate speech. And when you were talking about freedom of speech, where do we draw the line between, hate speech, which is supposedly speech that causes people to violence, and freedom of speech where, somebody can say racist rhetoric. Somebody can say, they got the freedom to say, blacks are this and Mexicans are this and Puerto Ricans are that. However, while that is ignorant and that is, not true about some of the stereotypes that we have with different ethnic groups, it is protected under law, because as long as you're not saying, kill all the blacks and kill all of the, whatever, then that's not considered hate speech. From what I've seen from Charlie Kirk's commentary, he kind of borderlined that, with racist rhetoric and hate speech, because there was a controversial thing that he said in regards to gun laws. And he basically said, if we need to kill more people to establish a federal gun law, federal gun law rights, then he was all for it. Now, he didn't basically, say that more people need to be killed, but he was suggesting that. So it kind of teetered on, what's hate speech and what's not. But going back to the Jimmy Kimmel incident. So Pat Bondi, the U.S. attorney, not the U.S. Attorney General, but the Director of Homeland Security, made comments about that, feeling that Jimmy Kimmel's commentary was hate speech. And I didn't find any hate speech within it. And I think a lot of people think that this is a dangerous path to fascism when we're talking about silencing media figures like Jimmy Kimmel. And there's even evidence of some far right and Republican supporting people who actually is against this. Take one Tucker Carlson, who is like one of the more widely known political right-wing commentators on Fox News. I don't think he's on Fox News anymore, but he even said that he even criticized the Trump administration for this. Candace Owens, who is, one of the, a popular Black conservative who does not think that this is right. And they both think that a person like Charlie Kirk, who they know personally, would be against something like this, because this is not really hate speech. So we're seeing an attack of the First Amendment rights in memory of Charlie Kirk. And I think this is going to go down a dangerous road. Like I said, a fascism. I'm possibly seeing things like witch hunts, political witch hunts, when we disagree with the current administration or we criticize America. I can see, federal agents rolling up to people's houses, basically kind of checking their IDs, making sure that, they're citizens of this country. I mean, we've already got ICE out here stopping U.S. citizens, detaining some U.S. citizens, just because they look like they don't speak English. But it's a road that I think should be avoided, because we're kind of living in this process called what used to be called McCarthyism. Now, McCarthyism is basically something that happened back in the early 20th century. Communism started spreading in the early 20th century with the form of the Soviet Union, which was formed in 1922. And when the Soviet Union formed, they were a communist country. But However, there were different countries that were adopting this political system called communism. So the government at that time felt like our government at that time felt like this was a national security threat, because in the beginning of the 20th century, we did have the Communist Party of America, but a lot of it was based in the labor movement, because before labor rights started being established, people were working like 12-hour days with very minimum wage, because there was no there was no accountability for these corporations to work these people to death. Matter of fact, it was basically kind of like slave labor. So the Communist Party, along with other groups, fought in the labor movement, which also included black activists who also fought for labor rights in the early 20th century. So what ended up happening was around 1940, 1950s, there was a committee formed by Joseph McCarthy, who was a U.S. senator, who wanted to persecute those who were following communists or what they call left-leaning. So you notice, like in today's media, you hear people like Trump call to fight against the left, or fight against communism, and fight against this. And the left and communism and socialism is sort of used as a pejorative for the right wing. But back in the 50s, Joseph McCarthy, who was a senator, formed this committee to eliminate the communist threat. And so this was an area called McCarthyism, and it was also called the Red Scare, because what was happening was FBI agents were arresting people who felt like they had communist or socialist leanings. And this even affected Hollywood, because there were several Hollywood people who were caught up in this whole McCarthyism. Many people call this a blacklist, because what ended up happening was many actors couldn't get jobs because they felt like they were too sympathetic to either the Communist Party or too sympathetic to countries like the USSR or the Soviet Union. So one of the biggest names of people that got caught up in the communist in the Red Scare was Paul Robeson. You heard of Paul Robeson, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Paul Robeson was a college-educated black man, graduated from Rutgers, was a star football player at Rutgers. Also, I think he spent time in the NFL as well. And he was an actor and a singer. But Robeson also claimed to be a socialist.
No, that I didn't know.
Yes, Robeson was a socialist, and he was also a political activist as well. So when Robeson started his career as an actor, he was making a lot of money in Hollywood. If you look at his credits, Robeson had a lot of work going on. But then when McCarthyism happened, they snatched his passport, and he was unable to perform in different countries, because what ended up happening was the government forced a lot of movie producers and movie directors not to bring Robeson on as one of their actors. So Robeson was going to try to, do overseas work, and he got his passport snatched. So they tried to kind of try to suffocate him financially, because Robeson was, one of the highest paying actors in Hollywood during that time. And during that time, having a six-figure salary was like, having a multi-million-dollar salary. But after that, after he got swept up in McCarthyism, he went from having a six-figure salary to a four-figure salary. And a lot of things that he couldn't support, a lot of things that he had supported, he couldn't support anymore. So he got caught up in McCarthyism, and several other people in Hollywood got caught up in McCarthyism as well. But not just in Hollywood, but different sectors of the of society. Lawyers and doctors were snatched up by FBI agents because they thought they had left-leaning kind of like left-leaning politics. And I kind of see it happening today. I kind of see, the way Trump and the MAGA people talk about the left and how they're kind of taking care of rights, but they're also talking about violence, because they're using this Charlie Kirk thing to say that the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk, and I can't think of his name, it'll come to me, but he was the one, he was what they call a quote unquote left-leaning, or he was transitioning to a woman, or whatever. And they're talking about how the left is causing all of this political violence. And I find it very interesting, considering that, when I look at it from a standpoint of it being fresh and new, not much is talked about, the guy that they accused of murdering Charlie Kirk. They always talk about his politics, but the thing is that Tyler James Robertson, that's his name. They always talk about his politics, but they never uncover how did first of all, he was basically, from the reports, what they said was he was basically shot from 2 football fields away. I'd like to know what type of rifle he was using. I'm sure it was a high scope rifle with a long range. And also too, this was a military style hit. So I'd like to know, where did he get his military training? Now, many people say, he was because I guess he comes from he's also from Utah as well. But apparently he's supposed to, went hunting with his dad. So that's where he learned to shoot. But you know what? Those types of hits, that's a military style hit. And I would like to know if he ever, so nobody says that he was in the military, but I would like to know if he's had some sort of military training, and if so, from who. So that's not really talked about much, because it's kind of still up in the air. They still call him a suspect. So, and even though they've charged him for it, they still have to go to trial, for his murder. But I think a lot of it, I think the problem is that people are not asking the right questions about why did they pick this guy. And then lastly, one of the more interesting comments about this whole situation was when the governor of Utah stated that Spencer Cox, when he stated that he was hoping that the suspect would not be one of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what did he mean by that? I don't know. But I think people got an idea what he was trying to say. And it wasn't just because the guy was supposedly from Utah either. So they were hoping that it would have been somebody of color, because soon after the reaction to the death of Charlie Kirk, many HBCUs got locked down because of viable threats that were, pointed onto their campuses. So they had to shut it down. And come to find out, wasn't even a black guy at all, or somebody black, or even somebody, somebody of color. It was a plain as day apple American pie white man from Utah that did that. So, you got any questions?
Yeah, and I was listening to someone today about that, where they said that statement, like, I hope it's not one of us. They were thinking that it was going to be someone of color, but you know what else, Gardis, this young man Tuck Tyler,
Mm-hmm.
he was going through his identity change, I guess, where now he, like you were saying, possibly, I think, trans, but he had a partner, so he was gay. And then it was some of the I guess allegedly gay, and it was some of the statements he were making, that he heard Charlie make, he didn't like, and he kind of texted his partner over and Discord and all of that. And I was like, well, I think everyone was looking at the color part, but nobody looked at the other conspiracy theories or the other things that Charlie Kirk probably did not agree with. Being evangelistic Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some things he didn't agree with. And one of them, when you were talking about Candace Owens, I wanted to talk about just one conspiracy theory, if you had a moment.
Yeah.
So Candace, she has been all over, like, the internet with pictures of her and Charlie, and she's saying that it was something about Israeli statement that people didn't like that he made, that they think that's why he was assassinated. Did you hear anything about that? I can read it off if not. Oh.
Yeah, no, I've heard it, because that's another burning conspiracy about the death of Charlie Kirk. So for those who don't understand, there's a conspiracy in particular amongst most of the right wing, and actually I picked up on some left wing people who are picking up on this as well, that Charlie Kirk was critical of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, for their handling of the Gaza situation. Now, what's interesting is there are some people, some high profile people from the MAGA crowd who is criticizing Israel's handling of the Gaza genocide. Matter of fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the famous built bad body congresswoman, even called the situation in Gaza a genocide. Something that Bernie Sanders actually just recently said, and Bernie Sanders is very critical of Netanyahu. But in just recent weeks, he just recently called it a genocide, whereas Marjorie Taylor Greene has been calling it a genocide for a while. And also, from my understanding, Candace Owens is very critical of Israel's handling of the Gaza situation. So many people feel like Charlie Kirk was going to speak out against this genocide. Now, mind you, the foundation Charlie Kirk, founded, Turning Point USA, they rack in $86 million. Okay, a nonprofit organization, $86 million, if I'm not mistaken. Some of those donors are actually people who support Israel. Well, if I'm giving you this money and say I'm a Jewish, bank owner, I don't want you to be talking about Israel like that. So there's a conspiracy out there that says that Benjamin Netanyahu, because of the fact that Charlie Kirk was going to turn against his nation over the Gaza situation, that Benjamin Netanyahu put a hit out on Charlie Kirk, and he got the Mossad to do it. Now, the Mossad is basically the equivalent to the CIA in Israel. And he got the Mossad to basically assassinate Charlie Kirk. Now, that's the running conspiracy out there. Not sure if it's true or not. There is evidence that Charlie Kirk did criticize the handling of Gaza. I'm not sure if he was going to be full blown, like talking against Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu, but that's basically the running conspiracy out there. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but if it is true, and let's just say hardcore evidence came out there that he was murdered by the Mossad, that would be something that would be very interesting. And also too, how the relationship, how the foreign relations between Israel and in the United States will become, because Trump is kind of like back and forth with Israel. He doesn't like Israel when they don't listen to him, but he loves Israel when Israel is doing their thing, like suppressing Palestinians. But when Trump basically calls them to stop doing certain things and they keep doing it, that's when he got, kind of goes off, because, Trump is such a great leader. I'm being facetious, but
No.
but because people listen to Trump all the time, but what do we know? So he has this kind of like, he loves Israel more than he hates them. But like I said, he only hates them for a minute when they, like, say for instance, when they started bombing Iran, even though they didn't get approval from the United States. That was one of the criticisms that was laid upon Trump by Benjamin Netanyahu. However, Netanyahu knows where his butter is bread, where his bread is buttered, and which is the United States, which gives Israel billions of dollars in weapon defenses. So he can't really say anything about Trump, because just like Trump is trying to cut off aid to universities and various corporations that, practice quote unquote DEI, he can do the same thing to Israel.
Did you hear about Charlie? Why am I echoing? I'm sorry, guys. Not sure why. I hope it's not too bad. But did you hear Candace Owens is not speaking, was taken away from speaking at his homegoing, and that's making the news too right now. So a lot of people are saying that this is what the reports are, that the company did not want a lot of Black people to speak. I don't know if that's true or not. And Candace was allegedly a friend of his, and she's feels slighted right now. So we have that going on amongst the Jimmy Kimmel, and I'm wondering, are people using his assassination and exploiting it, or because it says Candace Owens is raging about being snubbed from the Charlie Kirk Memorial speaking roster.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're exploiting it now. When I was talking about them censoring Jimmy Kimmel, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, like I said, who personally know Charlie Kirk, said that Charlie Kirk would disagree with this. He would disagree with silencing people just because they have a quote unquote difference of opinion. And so yeah, there, like when we have these funerals and memorials, it really, a lot of political figures in corporate media, they like to hijack the memory of certain famous figures. I vividly remembered like when Muhammad Ali's funeral was when Muhammad Ali's funeral happened, that they were not allowing like anybody from the Nation of Islam to come and speak, even though Muhammad Ali was a member of the Nation of Islam. He was, at one point. And, he still maintained a relationship with Minister Farrakhan, but obviously Bill Clinton was he was basically the main speaker of that funeral, which I didn't get. But a lot of a lot of these politicians like to hijack these funerals for their own political purposes. I myself was not a big fan of I wasn't a big fan of Barack Obama speaking at the funeral of the Charleston Nine in South Carolina. If people don't remember, that was the incident that Dylan Roof came into an AME church on the night of June 2015 and shot nine members of that particular church, including the pastor, who was also a state senator. The assailant was a guy named Dylan Roof, who basically had a manifesto and wanted to kill, basically said he wanted to kill niggas. And that's what he did, according to him. And he was arrested. He's currently in jail, and I think he might be under the death penalty rule right now because it was murder. So when Barack Obama spoke at the funeral, he started singing, and I was just so disappointed in him with this, with not taking it like seriously. Like that was a political hit. Now, let's talk about political violence, because there was political violence. That was 10 years ago. And we still have political violence, because the problem with political violence is it just basically breeds more and more violence. So think about the events. Think about the political violence that has happened ever since that time. You had several shootings at mosques, at synagogues. You still had a lot. Between the 10-year span, there's been several school shootings. Then you had January 6th. You had several. You had the assassination attempt of presidential candidate at that time, Donald Trump. Many still question if that was even an assassination attempt, but there was a lot of political violent events that has happened in the last 10 years. And a lot of it spews from words, which is being spewed from the White House about suppressing or even getting rid of the quote unquote left wing, as they said, because like I said, it's a pejorative that they kind of use to say that they're the monsters, they're the problem, they're the ones that are threatening your lives, they're threatening your children, they're threatening your babies, they're gonna rape your women, or whatever they call it. And it's basically the same political rhetoric that they use against immigrants. They've been using against Black folks for years. Black men were considered rapists. Black women were considered Jezebels, loose. There was no such thing as raping a Black woman, because a Black woman always wants sex. And this itself is violence when we're talking about words, when we're talking about dehumanizing somebody. The dehumanization of a particular person because of their color or phenotype, racism is a violent system because it, like I said, it practically dehumanizes all non-white people, and in particular, Black people. When you're talking about the dehumanization of it, whether it be through words, whether it be through thoughts, whether it be through actual physical violence. The Charleston 9, that's racist violence right there. And Dylan Roof shot these people because they were Black. So racism itself is a violent institution when you kind of think about that. So yeah.
I agree. I wanted to ask one last question. So we have the funeral coming up. It received the highest security designation from federal officials amid reports of threats. Should it and this will be in Arizona this weekend, his funeral. Should people be fearful of other violence that could come just because it is his funeral? We did hear that allegedly the shooter, the man that assassinated Charlie Kirk, Tyler, he went to Dairy Queen after that, allegedly. They have a photo of him allegedly going to Dairy Queen. I don't know why it took so long to find him, what was happening there. But they were bringing out the Secret Service. They have a federal coordinator and Homeland Security special for a special assessment a special event assessment rating level of 1. That's only reserved for events of the highest national significance and the same severity as the Super Bowl. They're bringing out a lot of security for this State Farm Stadium, I believe it is, where they'll have the funeral. And I'm wondering, like, would you be as a person that would attend, would you be a little fearful personally, or would the threat be gone?
Well, I mean, is President Trump going to be there?
JD Vance is going to be there.
Well, there you go. I mean, anytime a politician of that level, Secret Service is going to be all over the place.
Okay.
So even if Trump is there, if JD Vance is there, since he's the vice president, yes, there will be definitely a military style presence when you're talking about security, because of the fact that there's a political leader there. Now, obviously, the rule is, so if JD Vance is going to be there, most likely Donald Trump is not going to be there, because the rule is, the president and vice president should not be together outside of the White House, because a certain event like that would cause a catastrophe of, like, say they both get let's say something happens and they both get killed or whatever. Now, there is a line of succession, because now if the president, the vice president, and then it goes to the Speaker of the House, and then there's a long line of succession just in case the leaders before that. But yeah, it's always best practice not to have the president and the vice president in a public setting outside of, say, the White House.
Okay. And Brandon just said the Speaker of the House is attending as well. That's
wow.
Interesting.
That is very interesting, because that, what I'm wondering, when was the last time that the three people who are in succession for the leadership of this country in the same place in a public venue outside of the White House or outside of the Capitol? Because I'm thinking that oh wow, so Brandon Green says the top 4 line of successions will be there. That is interesting. That is interesting, and I'm hoping it won't be like, you ever see that show called Designated Survivor?
No, I didn't see
Sutherland. So that's funny because it's an interesting show. I used to be a big fan of 24 as well.
Okay, I saw 24. Yes.
Yeah, 24 was great. But then it started getting ridiculous after like season 6. But and that's why shows shouldn't be no longer than 6 seasons. After season 6, they just start getting crazy.
I agree.
But in Designated Survivor, Kiefer Sutherland is, I think he was like the minister of agriculture or something like that. And what ended up happening was the Capitol blew up, and it basically killed the president, vice president, the Speaker of the House, the Secretary of State, the Senate pro tem. It killed all of them. So he was the last line of succession.
Oh no.
And he became president because of the fact that somebody had blew up the Capitol and killed all of the leaders.
Wow.
And he ended up being the president by default. And so obviously his first job as president is, okay, who blew up the Capitol?
That is something. And I was just reading about that, and I was like, just to see, I saw people fighting over their spots to speak because I guess the program is out there. They need a funeral program. And they are like, well, I'm not on the program. And now it's saying Trump will be there, Vance, the Speaker of the House, Rubio, everyone will be there. And I'm like, I was wondering, I'm so glad you answered that question, because I was like, has that ever happened when they're all in one spot at the same time? I would be kind of scared.
It happens when they're in the Capitol or when they're in the White House, but outside of the White House in a public setting, that's unusual. That's very unusual.
Yeah. So it's and they're getting reports of threats already, which I think will happen. That happens all the time, right? But they're tracking several threats of unknown credibility. That's what a law enforcement bulletin gave ABC News. Violent extremists and unaffiliated lone offenders may view the memorial service or related events as attractive attack targets due to the attendance of these individuals. The other senior U.S. officials, state and local government officials, and political activists, and due to major international media attention. Just very interesting.
And it's interesting because this guy isn't even an elected official. He's not even like an appointed official at all.
He's not. And he's not an elected official, appointed official. And how much his company made, non-for-profit, is just crazy. I was looking at reports on how much he started off with making Charlie Kirk. I'm sorry, what was the name of his organization again?
Turning Point USA.
He started off with making $21,000 and got all the way over to $400,000 in a couple of years, which now his wife she's now the president of. And I'm like, who's funding this? Like, how is he making? It's not for, how is he making money? But guess government, PR, press.
Well, also too. So he started Turning Point USA with this big business tycoon named Bill Montgomery, who was also a conservative, but he had millions of dollars to kind of like pour into Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. I think Montgomery died like in 2020 through the COVID pandemic, but I mean, that's how he started. He started with a billionaire who basically kind of, gave him all that money. I look at Turning Point USA as kind of like, they're like the conservative, they were like the conservative side of Black Lives Matter when the George Floyd situation happened. You remember how much money Black Lives Matter was getting during that whole process?
Yes.
They were getting millions of dollars as well. So I kind of see like this as like a reverse way of doing it. But the thing about the far right and the conservatives is I mean they're very organized. in their rhetoric, in their spreading of right-wing politics, even though it's it's racist rhetoric as well. But yeah, I give them credit of having a sustainable organization that uses that money to kind of like spread their gospel of conservatism to the people. But you have other conservative organizations like PragerU, who teaches a lot of conservative viewpoints, and yeah, it's sad to think that they were able to go further with corporate funding than, say, Black Lives Matter, who basically most of their leaders kind of use that money to buy mansions and all kind of things that we don't even know what they did with it. But
that was sad.
yeah, it was sad.
So coming back home to Chicago, so as you were saying, Charlie Kirk went to school, Arlington Heights area, and right now they want to honor him at his high school, and they're split down the middle. There are petitions going around to honor Charlie Kirk, have an event for him as well at the Wheeling High School, and they're split. So it's a big fight going on there now. Do you think the high school should get involved in this, since he did talk to young people about this, or would this just cause more trouble because people are losing their jobs just for having an opinion on Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, his high school was forced into the middle of this because of the fact that he came from there. And I'm pretty sure because of the fact that these polarizing politics causes a lot of this political violence and dissension, they can't get out of it. And so when you think about his high school, a group of people who think that they should honor him and a group of people that think they should not honor him. It's sad to think because of the fact that because people are so far in their own corners of politics that the only way to be right is to destroy the other one. And so this high school is in a quandary because they don't want to really. I'm sure that the officials in their schools doesn't want to be a part of this. Let's just say, yeah, they want to respect, they want to respect the memory of Charlie Kirk because he was an alumnus there. However, because of what he used to say and disparaging remarks about, Black people and people of color, there's probably some people in that school who are of color who basically don't want to honor him. And I mean, do they have a right to not honor him? Of course they do. But at the same time, he is an alumnus there. But this is what polarizing politics is doing to this, not just this country, but society. I have to be right. And in order for me to be right, I'm not going to prove my point. I'm going to destroy you if you dissent against my opinions. So we're not in the mode of trying to prove that we're right. We're in the mode to trying to prove that not just that you're wrong, but you're inhuman. You're incapable of thinking for yourself. That's the rhetoric that both sides kind of spew against each other. And this this throwing out that you stupid, all this name calling and stuff like that. It's just basically it's the climate of today's politics, because nobody has any type of intellectual reasoning to analyze an argument and actually give something that is of substance to make people even, just to think about it. I can disagree with somebody, but damn, give me something to think about. Just don't keep telling me that I'm stupid, I don't know what I'm doing, or telling me that you shouldn't be thinking that way. Because one of the examples that I want to give is I was telling you earlier about the debate Charlie Kirk had with Breonna Joy Taylor, and she was talking. Charlie Kirk had asked her, did systematic racism stop you from going to Harvard? And did systematic racism stop you from graduating from Harvard? And I think Breonna said something to the effect where, well, just because there's an anomaly doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Because yes, there are a few Black people that do graduate from Harvard. Does that mean that systematic racism doesn't exist? No, not at all. And I find people, who I argue with, and I hate arguing. Not to say that I don't want to argue about racism, because I know it exists, and I know it exists systematically, because I have a different view of what racism is. Racism to me is not just a feeling. It's not just a bunch of white people calling Black folks the N-words or Klan hoods or Nazi swastikas and stuff like that. Racism to me is on a bigger level. And so Charlie Kirk kind of feels like, the only races that are around are the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan. And to me, that's a very simplistic and almost a denial of the system of racism. But Breonna basically made a good point about, Black life is not centered, Black life is not basically centered around an example of what I've done. I mean, you had people debate me about, if systematic racism exists, and then they come to me talking about, well, Gardens, you got 3 degrees and you got a family and you came up in a 2-parent household. Did racism stop you from that? Well, I am not the epitome of a typical Black life. I have the Black experience because I'm Black. But the thing is that there are very few people, especially Black men, who are in my position. Now, this does not make me special. This does not make me special at all. However, there are a few of us who do get that education, who do get a nice job. But that does not negate that there are several million Black men out there who are incarcerated, who don't have a degree, and who don't have any means to provide for themselves. So we cannot center our experiences, our personal experiences, off of what the overall reality is. Now we can kind of take our experiences and analyze how my life became different than what the overall masses is. But there's also a thing called the power of observation, observing what's around you. When I grew up amongst many of the boys in my neighborhood, of the 10 of us, only 2 of us had fathers that were in the household. So that's an observation right there. Yeah, just because I didn't suffer just like those other 8 guys who grew up without a father, that doesn't mean just because I had a father, it means that there's not a systematic plan to have children and boys not have fathers in their home. Because out of those 8 boys that I grew up with, either their fathers got incarcerated, they got caught up in the system, or they just couldn't handle the weight of trying to provide for a family. So back then, one of the things to do was to just leave the family and not be a burden to, to the family by having an extra body there, because, as far, with welfare laws, if the family living in the house, then they disqualify for welfare.
Yep. As soon as the father in the house.
Yeah. So it was brilliant the way Brianna reacted to that, because it's like, yeah, and she was probably like one of 3 blacks who graduated from her class at Harvard. So it's like, yeah, systematic racism exists, even if there is like 2 or 3 blacks that graduated from Harvard.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Gardis. And that is, you know what? Tomorrow, maybe I'll play the interview so that us as an audience, we could watch it together, because I saw some of the clips and it looks really like she really did challenge him for sure.
Yeah, she really challenged him, and like I said, it's a matter of, it's a matter of really analyzing reality, because I think the problem is that we like to skew reality to fit our own opinions, to fit our own purposes. We never want to be wrong about anything, and when we are wrong, we dance around it. We make it, we basically minimize it. And yeah, we just, when we get into these debates. So here's the thing about, because that's an interesting thing about what Charlie Kirk did in going to these universities, debating, or doing this tour of prove me wrong type of thing, because debates nowadays are not about learning from one another or learning about their differences. It's really about, no, I'm right and you're wrong, and that's it. And I'm going to do what the lawyers do, basically smear your character, because that's the easy way to discredit you, instead of basically arguing what is the truth, what really happened. And so you notice, like, when you watch cases, a lot of cases get won by, say, the defendants, because of the fact that the witnesses character was in question, and according to the court of law, according to what the judge or even the jury thinks, that they may not be capable of telling the truth. So this is what defense lawyers do. They attack the witnesses. They attack the people who, quote unquote, saw the crimes, and they go after the character. They go after their character, and it doesn't really point to what the truth is. Many people think that OJ did kill his wife, but what did Cochran do? Cochran basically discredited the investigation because of the fact that he uncovered that the LAPD was racist. But the thing is that the LAPD has been racist for a long time. So that's like really nothing new. But the way he was able to express that, typically that was one of the reasons OJ got off, because the investigation was tainted over the racist LAPD. But now, was that the truth? We don't know. All we know is two people ended up dying in that whole situation. Not just dying, but murdered, slaughtered. And if OJ didn't do it, then who did?
Yeah. Now, see, we'd have to have a whole. I read a few books. That's gonna be a whole conversation. I got one more. I know you have to go. One more question, if you don't mind. And if it's too heavy, we could continue this conversation in part 2, if you don't mind that. But I want to go to something that the Real Magnolia said, because that's what people have been saying all on the internet. It was that they didn't do all this for Martin Luther King. I want to go on to say like Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton. Who would you consider they had freedom of speech, and then they were assassinated the same way? Like, and they feel like a lot of people feel like more thought is going into Charlie Kirk assassination because he is a white male.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting question, because I remember talking to people during the time when Malcolm X was alive and he was assassinated, one including my father. So he remembers when Malcolm X was assassinated. And he said, like, there were people out there who were cheering on his death. And this even includes, well, I wouldn't say they were cheering it on, but I remember in the Savior's Day, that happened after the death of Malcolm X. I remember the Honorable Elijah Muhammad saying that Malcolm spewed violence and hatred, and he was a victim of it. But there were many white people who basically said that Malcolm X, called white people the devil, he deserved to die. But what was even more interesting, and I talked to at that time, it was an elder Black woman who basically told me personally that she was glad that Malcolm died, because he was talking about hatred. He wasn't Martin Luther King, so he needed to die. And I found that so interesting that Malcolm X would get all of that type of abuse after his death, after his assassination. And nobody is like censoring them for talking about you shouldn't celebrate the death of Malcolm X, or anything like that. I didn't hear my father saying like people trying to correct other people about you shouldn't celebrate a man's death, even if he did disagree with your opinions. Now, Martin Luther King was also interesting because there were several Black people who I talked to who lived in that time, the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. There were several Black people who heard white people cheering on Martin Luther King's assassination. Like, he was a troublemaker. He deserved to die. He spoke against the Vietnam War. He didn't deserve it. He was anti-American. And this is what was going on in the lower bowels of American society. Matter of fact, you heard of Jane Elliott, right?
No.
Okay, so and maybe
let me look it up.
Yeah, so Jane Elliott is a no, not Jane Elliott. I'm sorry. Yeah, Jane Elliott. That's her. Jane Elliott is she's what they call an anti-racist activist. I have my opinions on Jane Elliott because I think she is racist, but suspected racist. But Jane Elliott did say when she was a kid, she remembers the day Dr. King died, and there was several of her white friends had told her that they were glad Dr. King was dead. And so I kind of find it interesting how that dynamic, like years ago, yeah, she did the blue eye test. Yeah, she was famous for that because she was on Oprah. That's how I found who she was, because when she went on Oprah, that's who I knew who Jane Elliott was. But and she gets a lot of money for appearances. I'll say this as a sidebar. When I was working at Thornton Township, they invited Jane Elliott to speak at one of their events, and I think they paid her like $12,000. I'm surprised nobody came to the meeting. Was like, why are you paying this?
Well, you skipped two parts, Gardens, because you forget our old supervisor went down there for the Church of the Nine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, we have quite a bit of history.
Yeah. So I was surprised nobody questioned him on paying her like $12,000 just to speak for like 2 hours. But
You going to jail?
yeah, you're going to jail. But yeah, so you find a lot of this, a lot of this cheering on people's death when Dr. King and Malcolm X died. And nobody's talking about, well, we shouldn't celebrate, anybody's assassination or death. And I agree with that. But I've seen so much with, Charlie Kirk people, but also too with people who would, who would be considered the left, saying, yeah, this is, we shouldn't be doing this. But who's there to mourn the woman that got shot in the face 2 weeks ago at a school? Like, how do we mourn her? And I think the problem with this, with Charlie Kirk, is they're making him a saint. They're making him a martyr. They're using his death as a movement for fascism, which I think is problematic. I mean, like I said, the Jimmy Kimmel thing is just the tip of the iceberg. So they're using this death as a particular movement to quote unquote eliminate the left wing, as they call it. Like I said, it's basically coded language, because Charlie Kirk is basically considered, he's a more, do you remember Richard Spencer?
Let me look that up.
Okay, so Richard Spencer also a political right-wing commentator, but he claims to be himself a white nationalist. He admitted it. He's a white nationalist. Yeah. He was one of the people that helped Donald Trump win the first election, if you remember, because he was very popular back in the day when Trump was first elected. But yeah, he claims to be a white supremacist. But after Trump's presidency, and I think even before his presidency ended, you stopped seeing a lot of Richard Spencer, because I think what the problem was that the racists wanted to basically kind of streamline racism a little better. And I think this is where a guy like Charlie Kirk comes in. Because if you notice, Charlie Kirk doesn't use that type of language. He doesn't use white supremacy. He doesn't use the N-word or any of the blatant pejoratives that that people use against black folks. He'll use political terms like the left. He'll use stuff like laziness, don't want to work, or those type of things, trying to mask it as some sort of moral character. And he never mentions who these people are. Now, he would say black folks or black people, but then what he would also do was he would attack the moral character of these black people who are in poverty, or these black people who don't have jobs, or these black people who don't want to take care of their children, or not be fathers, or not even be mothers, But I mean, he did explicitly say black women are incapable of thinking, or something like that. And then he had that big thing where about the black airline pilots, where he was saying that if he saw a black airline pilot on his plane, he would be afraid, or
ask if they're qualified.
Yeah, ask if they're qualified. Because he felt like DEI was ruining everything, and that, you know, that wasn't the case. So he would mask it into this. He would mask his racist rhetoric behind the quote unquote DEI. They don't even use critical race theory anymore, because people have finally caught on that critical race theory isn't even taught in elementary schools. It's not taught in high schools. It's not even taught on the college level. The only time critical race theory is being taught is high level graduate courses or law school. So I think they stopped using that because I think people caught on to that. Like, you know, that whole point of kindergartners are learning critical race theory. That was a whole myth. So to me, I saw Kirk as the new Richard Spencer. He's basically a new refined Richard Spencer.
Okay, I can see that. He dressed the words up pretty.
Yes, he did. He dressed the words up very, very pretty.
Gardis, thank you so much. If you have time, I'd like to do a part 2 to see after the services happen, to see what the outcome is, what Jimmy Kimmel decides, and talk about I forgot, I had it on my note, so I'm so sorry. The man that was with, I want to talk about the history of the man that was with Hitler, and they made him a martyr. People started comparing him to him. Sorry, I didn't have it right here in my.
Oh, wait a minute. You said somebody with Hitler.
Let's see. I had it in my note. It's this U.S. Nazi like fight. It's a fight club. Yeah.
Oh, George Lincoln Rockwell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So George Lincoln Rockwell was the founder of the American Nazi Party. And what's interesting, and this is a connection with political violence, is that he was assassinated by one of his own former members of the American Nazi Party. So, but what's also interesting about George Lincoln Rockwell was, and I think it was a Savior's Day. If you look up the photographs, because there's actually photographs of this, George Lincoln Rockwell and two other people of the American Nazi Party was invited to, I think it was a Savior's Day event at the mosque here in Chicago. And if I'm not mistaken, Malcolm X was still in the nation at the time. The thing was that while they have a different view of this separation, because, you know, as you all know, the Nation of Islam believes that separation is the best thing for Black folks. They wanted the races separated, and this was the thing that they were preaching during the time of Elijah Muhammad, and they felt like separation of the Black race and the white race was best for both of them. Well, the Nazi Party agreed with that. They agreed that Black folks should have their own land somewhere else, and white people should have the land here in the Americas. And so they were actually invited to sit at a Savior's Day event. And I think it's the picture is so interesting, because if you look at the expression on George Rockwell's face, like, I don't know why I'm here, but I kind of agree with these Black folks about, you know, separation of the races. It's a pretty interesting photograph, and I thought it was telling when you think about hold on, I'm gonna pull it up and I want to show you this.
Okay. I was looking, I'm like, oh, he had a lot.
You got it?
I don't think I got it. Because they're outside.
Hold on,
I'm on a National Post right now, and it says,
okay, all right. So here it is. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
Because this is really interesting.
It is.
Share screen. Hold on for 1 second.
And then I had saw Sloan. You said Hess, and then it was another person that people been comparing Charlie Kirk to, Horst Wessel. So we're gonna have to do a part 2 for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
see it?
there, I see you. Okay.
So
All right.
this is the picture. This is the picture right here.
Okay, let's see. It's a bunch of pictures. I see. Hold
Yeah.
on.
So the one I'm
There we
circling
go.
right here.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to add it. Uh,
The one on the
oh,
far right. This is a picture of George Lincoln Rockwell and two of his
oh,
members of the Nazi Party at the Nation of Islam headquarters.
oh my goodness, that's where they were. They're here in Chicago at the Nation of Islam.
Yeah,
Wow.
and because like I said, they were invited by Elijah Muhammad because they basically kind of share the same views of separation of the races. Now, their intentions are totally different. Obviously,
Wow.
the Nazi Party, they want to kill black folks, but the Nation of Islam was more into self-improvement because they felt like if they live in this racist society, they will if they stop living in a racist society, and the only way they could do that is being away from white people, then they would improve the plight of the black folk, of the black man, as they call it.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought that was a real interesting.
That is very interesting. And to see right behind them, the whole will be a congregation or chapel, everyone behind them is black sitting there.
So Douglas was talking about Joseph Goebbels. Yeah, so Goebbels is one of the more important. He was actually one of the more important Nazis in the Nazi Party. He actually is the minister of propaganda within the Nazi Party. So when you're talking about the Jewish threat, this is how Nazism basically started, and this is how the Holocaust started, because Goebbels was the minister of propaganda and information, and the best way to get the people on your side is to throw out that information that the Jews are taking all your money, they're stealing all your money, they're inhuman, and they don't deserve what they have. So guess what we got to do? We got to take that because that belongs to us. This is what Goebbels was preaching. And many people in the German society latched onto that. They latched onto that particular preaching and decided, like, hey, we got to get rid of these Jews because they're standing in our way of being a great nation. What's happening right now? We got to get rid of the immigrants because they're standing in the way for us being a great nation. Well, Trump already says we're the greatest nation on earth, which is questionable, but I mean, it's basically kind of like close to what the propaganda is right now when we're talking about demonizing and making a certain group of people inhuman and falsely accusing these people of so-called taking, quote unquote, taking our resources or taking our jobs, because in reality, immigrants aren't taking our jobs because of the fact that they're not the ones making hiring decisions. Now, yeah, there are corporations who are using immigrants for labor illegally, but at the same time, it ain't the immigrants making that decision. It's the corporations who are making that decision. And so if you want to get to the root of the problem, we need to get to the corporations on why are they using illegal immigrants? And if they are, they need to be punished. The corporations need to be punished for that. And not enough corporations are punished for using illegal immigrants, if that is the problem. And so now you're seeing that the economy is starting to shift downwards because of the fact that many workers who are immigrants, and some of them are actually legal immigrants. They're actually not citizens, but they're legally they have work visas. Their visas are being snatched and they're being thrown out of the country and being sent to countries that they're not even a part of. Like they had that one guy who was I think he was from South America, something like that, and they're gonna send him to Ghana.
Oh yeah.
Like what sense does that make?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just generally this is an interesting time because nobody is getting a fair trial. It's just basically, well, we're just going to ship you off to whatever random country kind of accepts you. So, and then there's even to the point where they had to shut down a Hyundai plant in Georgia because there were South Korean nationals who were working in that Hyundai plant. Now, what is that going to do to the economy of Georgia now? Because that's jobs being lost. That's a whole plant being shut down. So you mean to tell me this government, this president is so concerned about, the welfare of the economy that he's willing to shut down a whole manufacturing plant in Georgia, a red state? I wonder what Brian Kemp thinks about that.
Man, that is, it's so many things that it looks like we're going backwards a little bit.
We're already backwards.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Gardis, for lending your wisdom as always, teaching me something new for sure. And yeah, I have a lot more questions after this conversation, so I would love to have a part 2.
Yeah, I gotta take a shot at you, Berg, because we were supposed to have part 2s in other conversations.
Wait, which one didn't we finish a part 2 on? You have to tell me.
Oh man, there was a lot of part 2s.
It was a lot. Okay, so this time, just hold me to it. We'll do it next time with the after the homegoing. We'll do that after the funeral because I know it's gonna be a mess. I already see something happening, and I want to know. I like what you told us about like the succession of everything. If everyone's going to show up.
Yeah, I would. That would be the only reason why I would watch that, to see if the succession of leadership are all at one place in a public area outside of Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see that.
Well, thanks for holding me accountable, Gardis. So I'll be ready for the part 2. I really learned a lot.
All right, Berg. I'll talk to you later.
You enjoy your evening. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, you guys, Gardis Watts, the brain of this operation, obviously. I appreciate all the knowledge he gives us. I never would have thought that you could talk to one person about so many different subjects, and they have, from everything, they have the knowledge. Y'all, thanks for joining me. Sorry if I didn't say hi to you. Douglas, Sloan, Wyoming, Magnolia, Brandon, Wildflower, Danny, everybody. I'm sorry if I missed you. Thanks for being here. We had an intimate crowd, but let's pick it up and see what happens with Jimmy Kimmel, and let's see what happens with the services too. And thank you, y'all, for in the audience for lending your wisdom and being open to the conversation, because I know it was a sensitive conversation. We're talking politics, we're talking race, and we usually don't do that over here. And I appreciate you so much. And Douglas, thanks for becoming a member as well. You guys take care of yourself and each other. I'll see you soon. Bye.